Well, welcome everybody. I am so excited to bring Quinn to you today. Quinn has naturally weaved beauty throughout her whole life. She started her career in the beauty industry before turning beauty inside out and became a registered therapeutic counselor and life coach. She is recognized as a thought leader as her evolutionary approach to mental well-being is truly transformational. Her work has appeared in the Journal of Child and Adolescent Behavior and has presented at several international conferences such as the Mental Health Commission of Canada Clifford Beers Foundation. Quinn is an author of a book, Resilient Social and Emotional Wellbeing in Young Minds. It's a manual for schools, which is so important to bring this message to our young people in today's world. Today, she's here to share her beauty secrets and how to discover and highlight its essence. I am excited to dive into this conversation with Quinn today and just talk about the value of beauty and where it truly is rooted. And it's not just always our outward appearance. So, Quinn, let's tap into our beauty.
Dive in. Yes, I love this topic. It's one of my favorites. And it has been since I was little. The idea of beauty and womanhood and being feminine has always been something I've been attracted to. And so I spent many years in the industry, did everything from uh, owning my own aesthetic studio to promoting international products, European products. I was a trainer for European lines and worked with estheticians. I was in the school system and educated people who wanted to become estheticians. So I ran the full gamut. And I also stood in department stores spraying people about the new products that were coming out. So I've done it all. But something, and I've always done self-development programs for girls. Through all of my journey in that industry, I always did self-development courses because there was something in me that knew that there was just more to us than just what we put on our faces or how we dressed. And so over time with my courses, what was coming up with the girls were conflict with their parents or not being able to figure out relationships with boys, and it really got me thinking. And so finally I decided to turn beauty inside out, and so that's when I went back to school and got my degree and started working as a counselor. And it's but what's been really interesting for me is that the field of mental health is very much focused on what doesn't work, and it doesn't see the beauty in who we are.
Mhm.
The essence of who we are is incredibly beautiful, and we don't recognize it, we don't realize it. And I've been working with women survivors of violence and abuse for several years now, and they don't see how incredibly beautiful they are and the resilience that they have to move through what they've been through and to come into this program that I'm doing. And so it's been really interesting for me to see how important it is for us to kind of be playful with our mental life, kind of like what you've done with your work. There's such a lightheartedness to it and such a beauty to it that it's refreshing. We can look at our inner life and be refreshed around it and learn more, because when we're more in a state of wellness, of gratitude, we absorb more and we can learn more and get more aha moments about something that maybe I need to look at to move forward.
That's right. I love how you said that women coming out of domestic violence situations that they don't actually believe how resilient they are or how strong and worthy they are of a better life than what they've endured or what they've been experiencing. My mom went through lots of domestic violence situations, and just to see the thickness of their skin of what they can actually who live through on a day-to-day basis. And when they do find that courage. It's not strength because they have the strength, but it's the courage to step out of those environments and to truly walk away and find a better life. But having to rebuild that value and who they are and who they were created to be, that's a powerful mission that you are on.
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I'm a single mom and I'm raising two daughters, and so this idea of blending this understanding of beauty that we're all exposed to through social media
Mhm.
and the society we live in, we're supposed to look a certain way, and yet looking at it from a different paradigm. So I shift that paradigm what I from outside in. This is what the society's telling me I should look like and what I need to put on my skin, to turning that paradigm around and feeling that beauty that's within us already and
Mhm.
really learning how to cultivate it in to the point of, yes, I wear makeup. I can't go without my lipstick, okay? But that brings me joy. It's not like, oh, what are people are going to think? It brings me joy to wear my lipstick and my heels when I'm out. Like, there's just some fun things I'm using around beauty and fashion that is part of who I am on the inside, and that playfulness of using these tools that we have been given to us in a way that uh, adds to my confidence. It's not like if I don't wear it, takes away from it. So it's just really looking at it from a different angle. And one of the things, there's a really beautiful poem by a Navajo First Nations. It's a Navajo blessing. And one of the first line is, "May you walk in beauty."
Mm.
And I just love that idea that every step we take it into beauty. And it helps us uh, define the path that we're traveling on. Is it a soulful path? Is it a spiritual path? Is it an empowered path as a woman? And just living into that and making sure that environment that we're in really supports that. And so for women living domestic situations, it's really looking at, is this serving my higher self? That part of me that knows I deserve more. I deserve beauty in my life, and this environment is not giving me that. And so where do I find those resources that supports me leading myself towards the path that I really want to travel in? And sometimes when we have to go from one path and one experience into this next one, it could feel painful. I mean, I think just going through divorce myself, it was like, this is a PhD in life. So you either suck it up and you get it done, or you drown in it. And because I had two daughters, I am a role model. I am role modeling for my daughters how to show up to your life when stuff comes at you that you're not ready for. And so that is the path that I wanted to show them so that they can lead their lives with integrity, with empowerment, and knowing how to surround themselves with the right resources.
Mhm.
Um, and that's that internal resourcefulness that will tap into those resources and take action from that.
That's right. So good. We learn so much from our children, don't we?
Mm, we sure
Like, I
do.
have a 24-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son, but I wasn't shown, like, my mom really had a really huge struggle in her life. And so I wasn't really shown how to value myself, that I never felt valuable or worthy of anything. My mom was in a very toxic place, which then spewed onto us kids.
Mhm.
And when you are being told you're nobody, you're nothing, you're never going to amount to anything, you tend to believe those things if it's coming from your mom. And so you just think that you going into the as an adult, you're just like, well, I guess I'm a nobody, I'm a nothing, and never going to amount to anything. I am a high school dropout, and I love how you said a PhD in life, because I laugh at that with my kids when they ask me how much schooling I got. I'm like, I have a PhD in life theology is what I'll tell
Yeah, yeah.
because I've been through a lot of things that some people haven't even been able to can't even fathom. And so I feel like no textbook or education could actually give me those experiences that I've been able to learn from. And I had made a decision even in my own journey that I didn't want my kids to grow up not feeling valuable or worthy, or to have the confidence in who they were and what they have to bring to the world. So I always went out of my way to try to, like, you're beautiful, you're so smart, you can do anything. And I may have set them up for some failures, because when they did have them, they were catastrophic failures, because you can do anything, and then when they do have a failure that was catastrophic. So there's got to be a middle ground somewhere in there when we're trying to educate our young people. But that
Yeah.
my specialty. I'm still just a broken person trying to make a difference.
Yeah, so yeah, that this is my favorite topic because I love working with moms who are raising daughters.
Mm,
It's so important that we're role modeling what it is to be an empowered woman. And
mhm,
failure is just success turned inside out. You wouldn't understand success if you didn't have failures. And that's a life lesson that no one can teach you ever. And so it's really important to let our kids fail and be there to support them so they can get back up again. So that's a life skill that when we're gone, they know how to do that on their own. And so, so important for us to be able to role model that. And I just want to go back to this idea of when our parents don't show up the way they need to for ourselves. I had beautiful parents, to be honest. They created a very loving home for me. My mother, I just remember her self-care was always taking hot baths, and she loved prayer, and so those kinds of things, but she wasn't there for me in the way that I needed her to be, because I was more of a creative mind, and I was like out there, and she didn't understand that world, and yet I didn't have the supports while I went down that path. And so so our parents, we all do the best we can, and yet we need to find a tribe to support as well our children, because we
mhm.
don't have all the answers either. And we also want to set them up to think for themselves, saying you can do it versus, what do you think? Do you think you can do it? Do you
Right.
have that instinct in you to do it? And
Mhm,
they know, they at the core of who they are, that's the beauty essence, is they know they can do it.
mhm.
And if it's not in that core, then there's too much in their head and they're having too much monkey chatter going on that's keeping them stuck. And so they need to drop in more. I've one client I remember talking to, it's like when it's a gut feeling, when it's the deeper knowing, it's like, yeah, I got to do that. If there's a failure in it, that's okay, because I was meant to do this. I was meant to fail. I was meant to learn from that and move on to the next plan, because I learned something from that.
Mhm.
When we have too much mental processing of should I, shouldn't I, can I, could, all of that, then it gets in the way of just living life. We get too much caught up in here. We stop living life and taking those challenges and see what shows up after that.
Yeah, John Maxwell will say he actually has a book called Failing Forward,
Yes,
because you
great.
can't really move forward without failures being part of the equation. And when we can look at all the lessons, like when I have gone through my healing journey and I go back and I look at all the lessons that I've learned through my failures, they're they're priceless. They truly are.
Yeah.
So no shame in failing. Let's just say that.
Well, it is part of being human. It really
Mhm,
is. It's part of the human conditioning. And and yet it's how we show up to those failures. Because some
mhm,
people will show up to those failures and going, I'm a failure and I'm not good enough, and they start to spiral downwards, and they go into the mental states of depression or anxiety or anger or overwhelm, whatever it is. We all have our favorites. And so we want to recognize the power of thought. So in creation, we all have, there's forms, there's forms of beauty. When we go out in nature, we see the incredible forms that beauty has taken in nature that just naturally happens. And so there's also what I call thought forms that we don't want to buy into so much. So when we go into a failure, we can drop into a lower state of thinking, and we can get consumed by the monkey chatter around that just pulls us off, where we want to stay really grounded with who we are and going, okay, yeah, this happened. What is the wisdom in that failure? What is the lesson in that that I need to look at so that I can move forward in my life, and so that I can take the gems? And sometimes those failures, you're not ready to look at them.
Right.
And it's okay to not look at them right away, because if I look over there, I could see myself starting to spiral down, and that is not healthy. Whereas if I'm in a higher state of mind and then I look at that situation or that failure or whatever it is, that there's a learning there, then it's like, oh yeah, I saw how I showed up to that. I could see how I didn't step into my power around that. So there's a lot of different ways. And a lot of times I talk to the ladies that I work with is that, we want to stay in the driver's seat of our lives. And so if you have a little, fender bender, you want to get back in the driver's seat and deal with things. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that. The fender
Yeah.
bender. Yeah, because we all have them.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of brings me to the idea of our blind spots. When you're driving, you have to look, because there's always a blind spot. Well, the same with our lives. We have blind spots in the way we look at things. Sometimes we can only see it. If you get really narrow in our thinking, this is the only way to do this.
Right.
Versus looking outwards, like, oh, there's another way to see that. Oh, there's a different way. And then you see these different possibilities, and then you get informed. I just think of health these days with we're being bombarded with messages around our health, and really it's about sitting quietly and just going, okay, let's take in all this information and sit quietly with it and go, what's in my best interest? What's in my body's best interest right now?
Right. Because there's a lot of really amazing things out there, but it's not good for everybody, right? Because we
Yes.
are all built and created differently. There's not a mold for each of us. We are unique individuals, and so our body needs unique things. So being able to sit quietly and to actually see what information we're taking in and what's going to serve us the best, and really take inventory to that before you make decisions is super crucial. I've been down lots of rabbit trails. I've been on the roller coaster of the dieting spectrum, and it just messes with me, and multiple others that I've spoken to. It has messed with their way they view what healthy is, right? I love the era that we're in, because I love there's some plus size health coaches that are coming up and really taking a heart to what beauty is, and learning how to love our bodies no matter what shape they are in, because there's just some women. I'm never going to be a size 4. Heck, never going to be. I am 5'8.5", and there's absolutely no way that I'll ever be a size 4 without being deathly sickly looking. Right.
Yeah.
So there is women out there that are just embracing and loving who they are in the shell that they've been given, and I love that um, trajectory that we're on in bringing that awareness to the community of health.
Yeah. It's sorry, my light keeps switching off. yeah, they are look knowing knowing who we are uh, doesn't have a form.
That's right.
There's no form to who we are. You know, we've been given this temple, and it's our responsibility to take care of it. You know, I remember I worked in eating disorder for several years, and one of the things that I would share with students is, you know, there was a model who was, you know, size 0, and they did this exercise where she had to slide down the wall and then she had to come back up gracefully. And she couldn't do it because she didn't have enough muscle in her legs.
Mhm.
And so, and yet a woman who was, you know, considered full figure was the top basketball player for her college team
Wow.
because she was a powerhouse on the floor, right? And so who's the healthy one in this scenario, you know? So if we don't take care of this temple, whatever form it has showed up in our lives with, that's our vehicle to get through life, you know. And so it's
Mhm.
nurturing that from the inside out. It's, you know, it's definitely the foods that we put into it, and you know, the water that we need to make sure that it's nourished, but it's also the thoughts that we put into it. We are made up of 70% water. And what's happening is there was a doctor, Dr. Emoto, from Japan, and he did some research on water. So he took 2 jars of water, and one of them he meditated on. He sent it love, kindness, joy, you know, just beautiful thoughts. And then he meditated on this other one, and he put in anger and violence and hate. And I don't know how long of a period he did that, but then he looked at the molecules under a microscope. The ones that he meditated on with love, the molecules look like snowflakes. They were perfect crystal form, right, like a diamond. They were gorgeous. The ones from the other jar were tarnished yellow. They were deformed. So that is a really good example of how those negative thoughts, those self-doubt thoughts, any of those kinds of things that we put into our system, what it does to our energy, to our
Right.
frequency. So, you know, that frequency of fear is low, it's condensed. Where we have a higher frequency of love and acceptance, it has a greater wellness to it, you know, and we feel lighter in our systems when we really know how to tap into that. And it all comes back to the power of thought.
Oh, it's so true. So true. And I love that analogy of the water, and our bodies are 70% water. So if we're speaking
Yeah.
that negativity to ourselves, how much havoc is that actually making on our internal systems? Like, we can bring disease on that way just because we're talking negative to ourselves. My perceptions, obviously, from that story, whether
Yeah.
that's scientifically proven or not is another one.
Well,
Another
actually, it has been because I was reading Dr. Moda's book, and there was another researcher. Oh, he was a doctor as well, but he, sorry, my light just keeps coming. Um, he 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 had clients, patients that were coming in, and he tested their blood, and the molecules were like kind of all over the place, the way the diagrams were, and they were from like a 6-year-old child, and he had another patient that was in their 40s and another one in their 60s, so it was just across the board. And what he did from Dr. Yamoto's research was he gave them only one thing to do, and it was about gratitude,
Mm,
and just really ground themselves in gratitude for a period of time. And then when they came back, he then tested their blood again, and the blood had moved into a healthier state.
wow.
And there was no medicine involved. So it was really interesting. So the physical symptoms that they had originally came in with had decreased immensely. So it just shows the power that we have around that. Is it okay if I just leave that light off?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
still see you perfectly fine. It'll
Okay,
be
good.
less distracting for you.
Yes.
Oh,
So yeah, so that was a really fascinating story for me to just see that. And so getting back to our lives and really knowing how to start living in our beauty more of the time is some people have rituals, or have morning practices where they just ground themselves. It could be in prayer, it could be in meditation, it can be in breath work, it could be yoga stretches. It could, so it could be journal writing. It could be in so many ways. I don't teach techniques and strategies because your wisdom will speak to you as to what that is for you, and you really want to cultivate that. Sometimes I give guidance to, give this a try and see what that feels like, because
yeah,
your body will say yes to that, or will say, yeah, that doesn't work for me, or yes, but in this way. And so then you're molding it into the form that makes the most sense for you in your life
so
and
true.
for your path, that you're traveling.
I love that. And I love how you are using the whole vehicle analogy, like our blind spots, our fender benders, even just the fuel that we put into our gas tank,
Mhm.
how we detail the inside of of our vehicles, like our mindsets and just the thought process. Is really just like you would just be deep diving and doing a detail of your car. Like you want a clean car, so we want a clean mind. So I love that analogy.
Well, I hadn't even thought about polishing it. Yeah, yeah, so true. Our minds are so when I speak of the mind, I think of it very differently from the brain. So the brain is our processing capacity. It's the data bank. It's the whole processing of making sure the vehicle works properly, right? So the lights come on the dashboard to alert you something's off, or so the brain is a gift, and so a lot of times we go on autopilot with it. We just, once you figure out how to drive, you just, oh well, I don't have to think about it anymore. And so I could be driving home and I don't even know how I got home because I was in la la land in my imagination about thinking about that grocery list or things I have to do when I get home, right? So we tend to go on autopilot, and we do the same thing with our um, with the mind. We don't access the mind's power because we're not in the present moment. The mind's power is only in the present moment.
Right.
When we go into the past, we're going into the memory bank and rehashing the past. When we go into the future, we go into our imagination and we start making that real instead of just being in this very moment and living this moment and experiencing this moment, experiencing this drive home of, noticing that person that just cut me off, and giving him a blessing because who knows if they're going to an emergency or late for their first date, or who knows. So this present moment, there's a beautiful feeling that comes with it. The more you experience a beautiful feeling, the more you are in the present moment.
Mm.
And the more we can nurture and cultivate this present moment experience, there's there's a more of a grounding, there's more of a lightheartedness to it, there's more of a peace to it, even in difficult situations. I've been in
Mhm.
situations where, somebody's coming at me, and if I'm grounded enough and staying present to that moment, I'm not bothered.
Right. Because then if we are bothered, we can almost pour gasoline all over that situation.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
I've
Yeah.
been there where I've turned 50 shades of ugly and lost control of myself. And I could not pull myself back in, even though I knew what I was saying and doing was completely
Yeah.
uncharacteristic of myself. And so then you have that then you end up beating yourself up, like I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have said that. And words have power. They life and death is through our tongue. And so I've had to really learn how to take captive of my thoughts before they fall out of my mouth.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about thought is that it's the vehicle that we drive. You know, we don't have an experience without a thought.
Right.
We just do not. And so we have this power of thought, and we could go into our cognitive brain, the old habits. So if I get insecure, I'm going to pull out that, that style of communicating that's not effective,
So true.
because I'm insecure and that's my go-to thing. Or I could stay present in this moment and go into what I call free flow. That is into where I'm connecting to a higher source. I'm
Mm,
connecting to my higher self, I'm asking God for guidance. Whatever it is for you, where you tap into something uh, that has truth.
mm,
There's truth in this direction.
right.
So, even though I went this direction and I blew up at somebody, you don't want to stay there after the fact and start making yourself wrong for it. You want to, have some, we drop into humility and grace
Mm,
where we go, wow, yeah, I'm going to love myself through this. I'm going to love myself through this because um, it was a moment where I dropped into my insecurity.
mhm,
Those words, that content is not me.
right.
That's the thing. My content, the words is not me. It's not who I am.
That's right.
It is a thought that I activated into action. That's it. And when we
Mm,
start to see that thought has created that action, and then behind all of that is this beautiful, wise, intelligent human being who's doing the best they can in that moment.
that's right.
So that person is not broken. They're not damaged.
That's
You
right.
know, that's the beauty of the spirit, of the human spirit. It's never been contaminated with anything. It's whole, it's perfect.
Mm,
And the only thing that we need to do is just be reminded to go home to it.
mm.
Yeah.
On autopilot. Please just take me home.
Well, that's a really great point. The more we start to understand how we function as human beings, that's what I teach is that operating system behind the brain or behind the brain. Once you understand it, you bounce back a lot quicker. That resilience, that I talked about earlier, that's why I love those programs because kids start to see that they are not their behaviors,
That's right.
and parents start to see that their kids are not their behaviors either. And we
Right.
start to see our parents that they're not their behaviors, right? We start to see
Yeah.
the innocence behind life, in operation. I have a really cute story. I was teaching in a grade 2 class, and what I'm sharing with you today is what I share with young children as well. And I walked into the class, and this little girl was underneath her desk, and her chair was pulled in, and she was gripping that chair with all her might. She was not coming out. The teacher could not get her out. Nobody was getting her out.
Aw.
So, and I was coming into the class, so the teacher was all embarrassed. And I go, "Oh, that's okay." I said, "Well, let's have our lesson on the floor today," because her desk was right near the open space. So we all sat on the floor and had our conversation. And I would ask her some questions, and she would engage. And so when the class ended, she came out. No questions asked. She just came out, and she was smiling. And
Aw.
so one other little girl came right up to me and said, "Did you see that? She's smiling." Like
Aw.
she was so confused that this girl that was holding on for dear life, protecting herself under this desk, came out and she was absolutely fine.
Oh,
And with children, I use the metaphors of the sun and the clouds to explain what we're talking about today. And I said, "Oh, her son came back out. Isn't that great?" Because the sun is constant, it doesn't go anywhere, but the clouds cover us up. So she was in some dark clouds underneath there. And so it wasn't up to me to move her clouds, it was up to her to move her clouds. And we need to get into that place where we're empowering our children to move their own clouds. It's not my job. It's their job. The same with me. When I get cloudy, it's my job to move those clouds. And so just tapping into that wisdom to know how to best do that in that moment is what we need to learn. And so that young girl learned how to do that for herself in that moment.
and she'll never forget you, ever. For a young person to be in that state of fear or whatever it was that she was protecting or guarding herself from breaks my heart, because I know what it's like to be that little girl. And
Yeah.
um, school used to be my refuge. Like, it used to be like, even if I was sick, I would still go to school because it was safer for me in the office in the sick room than it was for me at home. And
Mm.
so um but it was still not all that fun because I was not a well-equipped young person. Like, I was a welfare kid, and so we got tormented lots and bullied lots, but it was still safer than home.
Yeah.
So, but I can feel that when you shared that story, and my tears welled up because I'm like, I can feel that little girl
Mm.
hiding underneath the desk, and
And the beauty of that, and in what you just shared as well, is the wisdom you had. There
mm,
was that wisdom of knowing how to take care of yourself,
mm,
that being at school was best for me. That little girl needed that protection of that chair in that moment. That was her wisdom speaking to her. And so we don't recognize those things in people. We just look at the behaviors that are not, that they need to be disciplined. I was in another group where we're talking, kids were fiddling, especially boys, they fiddle with their pens all the time. They get into so much trouble. And I was in one class, and one kid was doing it and I didn't even notice it. And the teacher, shamed him in front of the whole class. And then somebody else took his pen away. And I was so bothered by that. And it's like, okay, Quinn, what's that about? Staying in a state of curiosity when something doesn't look right for you. And it's like, well, I want to find out what fiddling is all about. So I created a circle with the class the next lesson. And I asked for all the fiddlers to be on one side of the room and the non-fiddlers on the other side. And I wanted to have a conversation. And it was the most amazing conversation because, we're talking about fiddling and I want you to ask each other questions. And so one boy on the non-fiddling side said, "Why do you fiddle so much?" And he says, "Well, it helps me think.
mm.
It helps me to focus." And then somebody on the fiddling side asked, "Well, how can you sit there so still?" And this one student had this great answer. He says, "Well, I'm not always listening."
Ah,
And so it was just such a beautiful moment of the human spirit
yeah.
when we get away from the form of life that we've created and we've attached meaning to, and we get back to the essence of who we are and how we see the world and how we move through the world,
Mhm.
and so those that were fiddlers, it's like, okay, well, let's explore that, unpack that a little bit more, because if that helps you to listen, that's great. And when it gets to a point where it's distracting others, where it causes impacts somebody else, what do you do with that? And so that it never occurred to them that
Mm,
that could be happening, right? And
that's
so
right.
there's that deeper learning, that deeper understanding of life that's flowing and how we impact each other and how we show up to our lives. So yeah, so
We
that,
need to clone you and put you in every single classroom across this nation because that is because I think just not understanding where others are coming from is where judgment comes forth. And when we start judging judging people by their actions because we don't understand them, it causes so much diversity and separation from one
yeah.
another. And so, yeah, that is such a powerful awareness that you're bringing to such a young, multiple minds that they're going to take that lesson and it's gold. That is like pure gold that you're
Mm.
giving to those young people. I
Well,
love
and the beauty of it is it's all inside out based, meaning if I didn't have this understanding in my life and how that works, I
it.
wouldn't be able to communicate it to them. And the same with educators. And that to me is where my heart is. I mean, I could come in and work with a classroom of 20, 30 kids, but then I go home, but the teacher is there for 10 months. Parents are there every day in that child's life.
Mhm.
So more the adults that surround these young people, these young minds, understands how their mind works, how they create their own experiences of life, then they're starting to share that with their children and with their students in a completely different way.
Yeah.
So I've started teaching, sharing this with my kids when they were like 3 years old. We talked about the sun and the clouds, or if somebody, one of them did something that was not okay, it's, time to have some quiet time. Like just, when you're ready, you just come on back, letting their wisdom tell them when they're ready to come back.
Yeah.
Another scenario when my daughter was 5, we were just like this. There was, I just came home. It was Friday night, and I was just, at the end of my week, and she wasn't listening. And so I tried the strategies 1, 2, 3, and timeouts, and nothing worked. And finally, my light bulb came on. It's like, okay, my mood's dropped. I'm gonna go make a cup of tea, think about what I'm gonna make for dinner, and as I just sort of got myself together and started, dropping into that state of love I had for my daughter.
Mhm.
Always tears me up. I don't know why, but it's like, wow, she's doing the best she can in this moment. This is not like her. And so I am now dropping into my love for my daughter, which then helps me see her beauty in her wholeness in her, and not caught up in the drama of what's on the surface. And when I was able to see that, really see that, then I could come back to her and I could say, what can I do to help?
Right.
And it completely changed our whole evening, completely changed it.
Yeah, because she had a whole day full of stuff and events and things to deal with as well. So
Yeah.
that's so powerful just to take mama needs a timeout too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We
Uh,
do. And we need to be okay with taking those, and
yeah.
okay with saying, I'm sorry, because yeah, we have thoughts that come out. We've acted on those thoughts. And that deeper, wiser self knows, well, those weren't okay. And it's okay to say to another human being, you know what? I didn't mean that. Let's reset. Let's hit the reset button.
Right. I love that. You did talk about, mention something that you worked with young people when it came to eating disorders. And
Hmm.
that strikes a chord for me because when my daughter was in grade school, I was junior high, high school, that realm, she got into, she was bulimic. But we were completely oblivious to it because she would eat with us every night, eat throughout the day. And then she would go to the washroom, but we never thought that she would be throwing up. Like we never heard anything from the washrooms. Like
Yeah.
there was no signs or triggers for us to actually see that there was a problem. There's anybody else in this community that is struggling themselves with an eating disorder or a loved one that has an eating disorder, what kinds of things could you speak into their lives so that they don't look back and be like, I could have handled that differently?
Mm. Yes, I've known some parents that are in denial, like no, they don't, they don't have it, or and every parent is doing the best they can.
Mhm.
We do the best we can in that moment, and when we know better, we do better, right? It's that simple.
Yeah.
The fact that your husband had this insight of looking at the journal, was we do the best we can, and that was the you have to do some of these things when you're in a when you're at that point, and so it when we are doing the best we can, we don't want to start going, I can't do, I'm not doing a good job. It's finding those resources, which you did so beautifully, right? You recognize the journey you were on with her journey, and you got the support and you got the resources. You became resourceful, and
Mm.
that is critical. Even when my kids were sick after going through the divorce, one of my daughters, her stomach was just in complete knots, and she was not doing well. And yeah, I'm like resources, counselor, pediatric, naturopath, homeopath, like I was spreading my wings
Wow.
to get the resources. So being resourceful and acting on those resources are really important, and making sure that those resources makes sense to you and your values. And if you don't feel like you could trust your values, then make sure you have a referral. I always go by referrals from other people about, what pediatrician do you recommend, or which naturopath do you recommend. So I always go for referrals so that I at least know that somebody's gone to this person and has trust in them. So I always do that piece. Um, any type of addiction, if it's cutting or eating or not eating, workaholism, exercise is can be an addiction in itself, especially for those that are wanting to think they have to be thinner. Um, all of those comes back to the same principle of thought. We those that have that addiction, I have to cut to feel better, have a lot of thinking going on in their head, and they're buying into it. It's almost like thought is as fluid as a cloud. You can't, there's it's fluid, like you could jump right through a cloud, right? And then they disperse, and then they could come back and they could be really stormy and actually turn into a form like a tornado, like we've had in Vancouver last Saturday, so thought ebbs and flows all the time. But when we get into a habit uh, of thinking that for me to feel better, I have to not eat, spend more money shopping, drugs, alcohol, I have to work more hours, whatever it is, it's because I've dropped in my state of mind. My state of mind dropped into a low state. And we all do that as human beings. But what we want to see is that I don't have to act on it.
Mm.
I don't have to act on those thoughts. So if I have a thought I want to rob a bank, if I don't act on it, everything's fine, right?
Yeah.
If I'm really upset with somebody and I don't say, wow, what were you thinking? If I don't act on that, it's okay. I'm still creating an environment for dialogue, right? So
Mhm.
we want to look at the power of thought, because that is where our answers lie. That's where we get the insights from within to shift our paradigm, to shift our reality from uh, a habit that's unhealthy for me into something that's new.
Mhm.
So everybody has done that, leaving an abusive relationship. People who stop smoking, people will, I'm actually, one lady I talked to, she had an eating disorder for um, about 10, 15 years. And, everybody, doctors, family, resources, everything telling her not to do that. And I said, well, what made the change? She said it was like a switch went on.
Wow.
And that's the power of thought.
Mm,
You flip that switch. And that won't come from the outside world. It
no.
doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from within here. When you hear something really deep, it's kind of like what happened with your husband. He heard something really deep. I need to look at her journal. And that, knowing that you have strong values of privacy to cross that line, uh, that takes a lot of courage
Mhm.
because there was a knowing, there was a truth in there that he heard
Yeah.
that he had to take action on. So that's a
Yes.
really good example of truth.
Mhm.
And that's the type of thought we want to follow.
So true. He was so perplexed about it too. I remember him calling me on
Yeah.
that day. He's like, every time I walk past a room, I keep getting this pulling and this nudging to go in there. I don't want to, but what do I do? And he goes, I can't shake it. And it was just tormenting him all day long. And so I'm like, all right, just go read it. So I kind of gave him like the green light to cross that boundary. But I'm glad that we did, even though it did break down some trust issues with our daughter. But I'm glad that we were brought that awareness so that we could then, figure out what we were really dealing with. We had no idea.
Yeah.
So,
And again, for your daughter, like looking at thought, obviously that's that first, lack of trust. And yet, if she really dropped into wisdom and looked at the actions that you took in that moment and saw the gift in that, could
mm,
see the wisdom behind that or the truth behind those actions, she would have a different experience. She would have a different feeling around that.
right.
Yeah.
That might still come down the road.
Yeah.
We still working on some stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm
We are.
really quite happy with where our relationship is going. And I do see us continuing to nurture and to cultivate that relationship. And I'm excited how it's going to what it's going to bloom into. But there was a season that we were very disconnected, and it was heart shattering because my daughter was truly my saving grace, and to
Mhm.
not have her in my life in that season was almost catastrophic for me. Um,
Wow.
but it's not, we're doing a lot better now.
Oh, that's
So
so nice. Yeah, and as a mom and gone through divorce, yeah, your worth of understanding myself as a woman, yeah, when I drop back into who I am, it's like, all's good.
all is good. We have everything that we need within.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
love
it's
that.
knowing how to bring it out. It's knowing how to share it with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and our thought life is really truly a powerful force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
So we need to nurture it, right? And
Yeah.
cultivate it and
Yeah.
eliminate anything that's not serving us because there's a lot that can come at us in the day. So,
For sure.
yeah. So, Quinn, thank you. I have loved everything that you have shared here today. If anybody here in the community is like, oh, I want to know more, or I want to be able to get plugged in and learn and go deeper with Quinn, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I think I sent you my calendar. So if anybody wants to book in for a 20-minute discovery call, be happy to do that and walk away with some beauty tips that you can take into your day. I'd be happy to do that. And I also have a PDF, which is the beauty secret that I'd love to share with your members.
That is so generous of you. And the beauty secret, what, like diving into that, just as a summary, what does that offer? What does that bring to the people?
Well, it's a reminder of of how beautiful you are.
Oh, we all could use a little reminder, can't we?
Yes, you can.
Well, thank you so much. I very much appreciate your gifts and just being able to offer your calendar to the members here in the Beautiful You community. I appreciate everything that you've brought to us today and just talking about beauty and how it's from the inside out and just transforming that. And that we're allowed to wear makeup and lipstick just to increase our confidence, not
Yeah, that's right.
bring us our confidence.
Yeah.
That's a perfect thought, because sometimes we feel like, oh, I just can't leave the house without makeup, but just choosing to wear it to enhance our ourselves is because we enjoy it. That's a different perspective.
Yeah.
And then just the analogy of the whole vehicle and the blind spots and the fender benders that can come at us, and just always being sure that we're taking care of that vehicle the best way we know how, which we already know. It's intuitive, it's already in us.
Hmm.
And learning how to, I just get this little girl, I actually see myself underneath that desk, um,
Oh,
learning how to like push the clouds away so that the sun
yeah.
can come out. And that is such a powerful story. That one's going to stick with me forever.
Oh,
So thank you for sharing it. I appreciate that very much.
oh, my
Um,
pleasure. And thank you for having me here and for the work that you do. You're a really good example of breaking open with your life, from the journey you've been on and how you're creating a space for women to be okay to learn how to break open in the most beautiful way. And so
yeah.
thank you for creating that space.
Well, thank you very much. It's my utmost honor that I've been given this gift to bring to the world, and that's with all of my junk. So
Yeah,
I just gotta lay
good.
it all out there because that
That's
there's so
good.
much learning in it. So
Well, you know what? And that's what I love is that is it's real. Life is real. It's messy, and there's a beautiful saying, you want to make your mess your message. And there's a lot of beauty in that.
yeah, and power. We get strength, we draw strength from that when we're like, hey, especially when we're facing new adversities, we're like, oh, I'm never going to get through this. You're like, girl, give your head a shake. See all the stuff that you've already overcome? You got this.
Exactly.
So it's a nice reminder,
Yeah.
just to be able to see the strength that we already have within us when we're facing new adversities. So
Yeah.
if I can be a reminder to the community that they too have that same strength, and they've already overcome so much that they can get through this next season of adversity, and keep on keeping on.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Well, thanks, darling. I appreciate you, and I look forward to staying in contact and connection with you.